Hello and welcome to another edition of your vlog series here at Media Insight. Today we'll be looking at the recently increased fuel prices, and joining me in this discussion I have the honor and privilege to sit here with the chairman of the National Gas Company, Mr. Conrad Enill. Welcome.
Thank you.
So it's a very busy week for you.
Yes, that is normal.
That is normal. So we're going to get straight into the discussion. There have been mixed views on the increase in fuel prices. What is your take on it?
To begin with, I think that Trinidad and Tobago needs to understand that the price of fuel that the population pays is subsidized. That is to say that when you import fuel at a particular price, that price is not paid by the driving public.
Yeah.
The government, quite frankly, picks up a significant portion of that. So any discussion around whether it is right or it is wrong has to do with the government's ability to pay for your price, for your cost of driving. The government cannot do that because since 2010, we have been living on borrowed money.
Wow.
If you look at the annual conversations that the finance minister has with the population, at the end of the conversation, there are two statements that he makes which we need to be concerned about. One is the amount of revenue he collects, and two, the amount of expenditure he has. And we have not had sufficient revenues collected to be able to pay the expenditure that is required to run the country. So there are two ways to look at it. The first way to look at it is that we are living above our means. However, because we have the ability to borrow, and this is based on you looking at the amount that we have borrowed and you are measuring it in terms of your debt to GDP ratio, so we have room to borrow. The philosophy that the government has practiced is that let us maintain our expenditure level at this time. Let us borrow to keep that expenditure in place, and let us do things that will increase our revenue over time. One of the things that will increase our revenue over time is to pass to the population costs that they have control over. Your cost of fuel, your cost of transportation, your choices of transportation is something you have control over. Let me explain that. There is a choice in Trinidad and Tobago today for you to use CNG.
Yes.
CNG will cost you $1 compared to $6 or $7,
Yes.
$8 or $9.
Yes.
So if you want to reduce your transportation costs, all you need to do is to convert to a CNG vehicle, and you would save money rather than it will cost you money. But that is a decision you need to make.
Yeah.
If you do not make that decision, then how is it possible to blame the government for a decision that you are making?
So are you saying that probably a short-term fix, or with a short-term which could benefit drivers in the long term, is a switch to CNG, which is even better for the environment?
I'm not saying that. Now, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that each individual has to take responsibility for the decisions.
So it's their choice, basically.
It is your choice.
Okay.
If I can pay for a vehicle at $500,000, then it really doesn't matter what the cost of fuel is. I would be able to pay for it because I have an income stream to support that.
Yes.
If on the other hand, I want fixed wages, I'm a salaried employee, and I cannot do that, then what I need to do is to rearrange my priorities and determine whether there are other ways for me to do the same thing.
Okay.
And I'm saying that that is the conversation that individuals need to engage in rather than whether it is more or less.
Yes.
The fact is that the cost of living will go up because the rest of the world is in a particular state and we are basically responding to what is happening on the outside here. Everybody has the same situation. How you respond to it is what is different.
Now, well, you would have known that Media Insight tracks and analyzes the conversation carried out on various platforms. So the sentiment currently is very neutral. However, the emotions attached are somewhat of a higher percentage of anger. Now, is it that we have a disgruntled nation based on the choices that they have made?
Yes, absolutely. Because in many instances, as we are seeing with the country, we are borrowing to maintain this lifestyle.
Yeah.
If you are borrowing to maintain this lifestyle and your ability to borrow suddenly is cut, somebody is going to have to give up something.
Yeah.
If I'm accustomed to a particular thing and I have absolutely no input into it and all of a sudden it disappears, I must be angry. But the basic responsibility is not that of the government.
So in a nutshell, the government has shouldered the weight of the fuel subsidy for a very long time and gradually inched it off and said, we're no longer in a position to do so. So the citizens will have to bear some responsibility for whatever lifestyle they choose.
That has always been the case. It has always been the case where you are making decisions for your life.
Yeah.
The problem is that you have to make those decisions in the context of what is taking place in the rest of the world and what your government, any government, is able to do.
Now, I think a lot of people don't understand how direct the impact of the Russian-Ukraine crisis impacts our country. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Even before we go there are two other sets of issues in Trinidad and Tobago that we need to consider. The first issue that you need to consider is where is Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time during this historical period getting its revenue?
Yeah.
Energy was that. The challenge you have in energy today is that although prices are high, your production is low.
Yes.
So you are losing on production and therefore you are not able to maximize the price that you are getting. So all that we're doing right now is trying to stay where we were. That's the first issue. The second issue is that COVID-19 created a significant amount of trauma in the society. And the government sought to borrow to lend support to individuals who had absolutely no way of maintaining an income because the country was shut down.
Yeah.
So that the government expenditure increased. Now you have the situation with Ukraine and Russia, and what that has done is that it has created two additional problems to add to the problem we had before. The problem we had before, based on COVID, was a logistics issue within the supply chain. What was happening is that you had warehouses that had product, but you didn't have shipping facilities available, and the shipping facilities you had were in fact increasing. While we were dealing with that, up comes Mr. Putin, up comes that war, which has made supply more difficult. Because it means now that the products that Russia, Ukraine, and that part of the world would have supplied to us is no longer available. And therefore you now have a supply-demand imbalance, which means that for the same goods, the price is going to go up.
You have to pay more.
Of course. That's where we are today as a society in terms of the challenges that any government, any business has to face.
Now, while you're saying that, some of the business communities have argued that maybe the timing of the fuel hike was a bit untimely because of the recovery of the economy. Do you agree with that?
So my view is that there are two choices the government had. The first one was basically to do what they're doing, which is to share in the burden, or the second one was simply to say, no, we don't have the resources for it, and let the population pay for the market
Everything.
price of the goods, which
Yeah.
is happening in Barbados, Jamaica, and every other country except Trinidad. So when I hear the argument, I wonder whether we live in the real world.
Do you think more should be done to probably educate people, or do you think that sometimes people are just not willing to learn, and they just speak because...
No, I think that the conversations that we are having in the society are not appropriate at this point in time.
So what should the conversation
The
be?
conversations in our society should be around the cost of living. It should also be around what is taking place in other societies and how other people live in the same world that we've occupied. If we're able to understand that, then we are able to understand that, in a sense, we do not pay the real cost of anything.
Very much so.
Electricity. They owe the national gas company $6 billion because, unfortunately, the price at which TNTech gets gas is not the price that the NGC pays. So gas, electricity is not at the price in the marketplace. So this is not a society in which the market price for goods and services are passed on directly to the population. The government intervenes in many instances. And really and truly, you would hear some commentators talking very badly about subsidies.
Is it really such a bad thing?
Well, it depends on who you are. The subsidies is really the cost of keeping people in the society where they have always been insofar as their lives are concerned. Because in the subsidies you have housing, where the government participates in providing some cost to the housing system so that ordinary individuals, can be properly housed, in medicine, through CDAP and those kind of issues. And really and truly, when you look at that subsidy program, you see that in many instances, the government is foregoing their revenues in the hope that individuals will participate. But individuals are not participating. Let's talk about vaccines. The government has provided the vaccines. People have said, no, we're not taking it. How is that then a problem that the government has to deal with? Government get blamed for it.
Yes.
But it is you that have to make personal decisions about your life. And I think the biggest issue that we have in the society is that we're not having that conversation about you making decisions, but you do not have to make bad decisions. There is information available that allows you to make choices. We're making bad choices in some instances.
And some deliberately.
Whether it is deliberate or not, at the end of the day, the purpose of any government, the purpose of any individual is to have a quality of life that is really good. And I'm suggesting that if we sat down and we analyzed what is available to us, in many instances, we can do that.
Okay.
But it requires us to sit down and do the work.
Yeah. It requires serious dialogue.
It requires you to basically understand what is available to you. Because if you do not know what is available to you, then you do not know how to benefit from it.
I want to get back to a point you were making earlier about CNG. And now, we all know that the roads, when you go out the road, you see many CNG cars. Has NGC seen probably an increase in...
The answer is yes,
Yeah.
and you will. Because if you have a situation where... So there are two things. If you decided to use CNG as a portion... Well, let me play this scenario differently. When you convert to a CNG vehicle, you can use CNG and you can use normal gas.
Yes.
Right now, you're using 100% of fossil fuel, which is you go into the pump, Let's say you do 100% of that, right? That has increased by $1.
Yeah.
If you decided, for example, to convert to CNG and use half CNG and half normal fuel, you may be able to use the same amount of dollars for transportation fuel that you used before and get the same benefit.
By just cutting costs and
by just changing
yeah.
the mix. And it's available. So it is not to say that you have a situation where you are totally unable to survive. You can.
And I mean, the use of CNG is also more environmentally friendly as well.
Well, the world is moving to a stage where they are saying, listen, we need to get to more environmentally friendly type fuels because of A, B, C, D, and the evidence suggests that on the climate side, you have lots of issues that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with those. In fact, the way countries now manage this whole question of development is they look at economic, they look at social, and they now look at environmental. And if projects or activities do not meet those three dimensions or three pillars, as they call them, they're frowned upon. Because there is a requirement that they are interlinked, but at the same time, you need to focus on the environment, otherwise you wouldn't have a place to live.
And speaking of that, I know that the industry has been doing their own thing with regards to going green.
So to put it that way is really not the way I'd like to put it. What I would like to say is that Trinidad and Tobago, as a society operating in the energy space, has had to make commitments to the rest of the world as it relates to what it will do about the challenges of the environment. And the NGC is in a position
Yes.
to basically do something, and it is doing something.
And what is that something?
So one of the biggest issues we have with greenhouse gas emissions is something called methane. And what the NGC is doing at this point in time is developing a mechanism where we can understand methane, manage methane, and reduce methane. So we're involved in that in a big way. The other things that we're involved in, we're looking at energy efficiencies, we're looking at solar, we're looking at the whole mix of other kinds of interventions. The challenge that we're facing, as we have had with CNG, is that if you are able to pay for something at a subsidized cost, then you are not going to switch to a higher cost item. And usually these solutions, these alternatives are higher cost because they can't compete with a subsidized product. They can compete with a product that is high price. So for example, CNG can compete with the market price of normal gasoline, but it cannot compete with a subsidized price.
Interesting.
So I guess the point is that going forward, the population has to be a lot more involved in their own future. And in order to do that, they have to be listening to different things.
Do you think more education campaigns are needed?
No.
No?
No. I don't believe that more education campaigns are needed. What I believe is people's attitude towards their life has to change. Because if your attitude towards your life changes, then you will get the information. All you have to do is go on Google.
But won't you say that having more education campaigns would influence the decisions they make on their life choices?
Nope.
No?
Because we have a lot of bright, dunce people. They go to school, they're highly certified, but if you listen to them, they talk nonsense. The attitude is what makes the difference. If my attitude is that I will be responsible for me, I will go out and look for information to support the fact that I want to be independent. I want to make independent choices, and I want to make choices that are sustainable. If my attitude is that my problem belongs to somebody else, then that is exactly what I will do, which will not solve your problem. So education in itself is not enough. What is also required is leadership, which is basically, what is your vision for yourself? It's like losing weight. If your vision for yourself is to be healthy, then you have to decide what choices you will make every day. You have to decide whether you're not going to exercise every day. You're going to have to decide whether or not you're going to understand that for you to be healthy, there is a program that you have to follow. You have to decide that, nobody else.
That's a nice way to put it. Staying on the education topic, what is NGC doing to, there are so many graduates coming out of university. Does NGC or would NGC be looking at probably increasing their intake of professionals anytime soon?
So the NGC group will always be looking for individuals who fit the organization's transition plan. The organization has to do two things. It has to basically do what it is doing better. Mm-hmm. It has to green what it is doing. And it has to transition into the new world that is emerging. Between now and 2050, the products that the NGC is involved in, which is natural gas, will continue to be demanded at the same level it is demanded now. However, by 2050, what we see is the world supply, will have some renewable pieces to it, so that the entire mix is going to change. So NGC has to be able to stay where it is now. A function of that is the whole question of production.
Yes.
We have capabilities, but we do not have the kind of production because the companies that are involved in production have to make decisions around, if you invest in this now, is the world going to change on you? Are you able to monetize it? And those things take some time. So you'd hear me say, for example, that those are discussions that are taking place at the level of the government, because the fiscal incentives to cause those decisions to be made are policy issues. And, Minister Young and government is looking at those, and I think that they will be successful. But it takes time. It does take time.
I want to ask you, we're stepping out of the pandemic. We're not fully out of it, but what was the direct impact, or what was the impact of COVID on NGC?
Nothing really. In this sense, we simply, so the NGC had a plan, maybe in 10 years' time, to get to artificial intelligence and those kind of things. So we were discussing that. And I think when COVID came, what we simply did is collapsed it. We had a view that says, hello, in 10 years' time, we would get to remote work, we would get to this, we would do all the things that we saw were happening as a result of where the world was moving.
Yeah.
So technology was a big part of what we were looking at, because we recognized that we couldn't continue to compete in a world that was becoming very technologically savvy. So we had a plan for it. Recently, I think we approved a significant sum of money to update the technology to give us information. Right now, for example, I can tell you simply by going on a device what is happening in NGC in any part of the NGC group, in any company at this point in time.
So it has probably sped up the
What it
process.
did is that it simply put us in a situation that said, listen, this plan that you had 10 years down the road, you have to execute it now.
Wow.
Okay, yeah.
And it was well executed.
There's a whole thing that we did that we can talk about what we had to do. The first thing we did is we ensured that we had what we call a business continuity plan. Mm-hmm. We made sure that the health, safety, HSSE guys were responsible for it, because we had a health and safety issue. They were involved in making sure the protocols, they told me I couldn't come into office, and I said, okay, well, all right. I had to stay home, and, they controlled what happened on site. And all the other bits and pieces that we had to deal with, digitalization, people, cash flow management, all of those areas we actually managed. And we managed it to the extent where AmCham, who were looking at what companies did over the period, felt that we had done it better than most and awarded us something for it. So yeah, we have a model for it.
So it was certainly executed well.
Absolutely.
Right. Mr. Enill, before you go, I want to ask you your closing comments.
I see a lot of excitement with going forward. There are lots of opportunities, but I think that the fundamental challenge that we face is how we approach the future. There are those who approach the future with doom and gloom. I am not one of those, because I think that we have both the ability and the infrastructure to make a better set of choices than we have made in the past, and to have a quality of life that is still very much better than many other societies.
So there you've heard it from Mr. Enill himself. Thank you, Mr. Enill.
Anytime.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this edition of your vlog series here at Media Insight. I'm Kristee Kalisingh. Until next time, bye for now.